What are we gonna do when we get back?
What are we gonna do when we get back?
I take a shower and hit the rack.
Take a shower and hit the rack.
Welcome to Charlie Mike. If you're a combat veteran with an entrepreneurial bug and want to know what highly successful combat veteranpreneurs are doing to transform their sacrifice and experience to create their visual reality, then this is dedicated to your inspiring and fulfilling future. And now your host, Dwayne Perrell.
No way, gotta run, beat, lots of fun.
Invest in Yourself ebook is my free gift to you for listening to the show and becoming part of the CO Nation. To receive your free gift, please go to landmarklifecoaching.com. Thank you for joining us on this episode. There are so many veterans with the core strengths to become successful entrepreneurs and continue to make a huge positive impact on our country. Here we highlight the amazing successes of combat veteranpreneurs. Combat veterans, for the purpose of this show, are soldiers, sailors, Marines, and airmen who have served the United States in wars, campaigns, and in theater on foreign soil or hostile waters. Our guest today is Andrew Marr. Andrew is a Special Forces Green Beret, co-founder and CEO of Warrior Angels Foundation, and is on a leadership team of Warrior Soul, and co-hosts the Warrior Soul podcast with Chris Elbert. Andrew is married to Becky, the love of his life, and together they have 5 children. Marr's last deployment in 2013 was emotionally and physically taxing. He and his Special Forces team were engaged in constant combat throughout its entirety. Marr suffered numerous traumatic brain injuries from explosions, which resulted in his medical retirement. When Andrew returned to the States, his health and cognition began to spiral downward. Once an elite performer in life or death situations in combat, Marr now struggled to get through the day. He was plagued by psychological, physiological, and physical manifestations, including depression, outbursts of anger, anxiety, mood swings, memory loss, inability to concentrate, learning disabilities, sleep deprivation, loss of libido, loss of lean body mass, muscular weakness, alcohol, developed a massive deep vein thrombosis, which is a blood clot that broke off into both lungs, and a number of other medically documented conditions. Andrew wasn't impressed with the current state of veterans' traumatic brain injury and post-traumatic stress patient care. So instead of waiting for someone else to take change, he decided to act. He sought out to find an alternative way to provide world-class care to veterans affected by TBI and PTS. All right. Well, thank you for joining us here, Andrew, and I'd like to welcome you to the show.
Dwayne, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for running through that bio, and I'd like to say I'm as healthy and as functioning at optimal capacity today than I've ever been, and it's a true testament for getting really clear about what you want and finding a way to go and get it and get after it.
Outstanding. That's so great to hear, because so many veterans do go through, in particular with your specialty in the military, go through these very significant events. And I'm sure there's many listeners that can relate to at least some, if not all, of what you went through. And so I'm sure you'll be a huge inspiration to the listeners that have had similar situations or are currently dealing with those kind of situations. So before we get into your entrepreneurial experience, can you give our listeners a brief overview of your military experience?
Yeah, I enlisted in 2006, right after I graduated college. So I had a bachelor's degree and then decided to enlist. Went right into the Special Forces training pipeline. And so I spent my entirety of my career in special operations community, either in a training unit, but the majority of time on an operational ODA, Operational Detachment Alpha. It's the Green Berets. And so I was medically retired in the summer of 2015, so a little over 5 years on the team, multiple combat deployments. My specialty on the teams was 18 Charlie, so that's a Special Forces engineer. So logistics, a lot of admin, but the fun part of the job for my specialty was demolitions, and that allowed me to work with explosives, and that had me in and around a number of explosions, through the entirety of my career, just like everybody else. But that coupled with a number of combat trips, kind of led to what I experienced, which is difficulties with all that head trauma.
Yeah, very, very, very interesting, experiences that would create that. When you were growing up, or because you said you had went to college first and got your bachelor's degree, was going into the Special Forces something that you had always had an interest in doing, or what kind of led you to that
It was
path?
probably, good question, Dwayne. It was probably a secondary motivation. And my first love was football, and so from age 10 all the way up to graduating college, I played in college. That was my love. I had aspirations to play at the highest level, and when that kind of became clear that journey was over, it was looking, okay, well, where else can I provide value? What gets me going? What jazzes me up? And how can I integrate that into my life? And so, thinking about those things, it was kind of a natural progression to go into Special Forces. I was a part of a small team, like I said, from a very young age, and that was just felt very natural to me. Couple that with everybody has a 9/11 story, but I remember I was in college when that happened, kind of pursuing my own interests, but paying very much attention to it, and I made that decision that, hey, once what I deemed was my goal had kind of come to a close, I thought it was time to serve something bigger than myself, and I thought it was a worthwhile a mission to join the Army and to go into SF. So that's the reason we went that way.
Yeah, great story. That's a very interesting path, because a lot of people will kind of do the reverse, right? They have they go into the military and then they get a degree, or if they've got a degree, they become an officer. So very honorable path and interesting information. So as you were deciding, obviously with the medical conditions and things that you were experiencing as you were transitioning out, what were your thoughts as you were transitioning? Was it, I really want to become do something entrepreneurial, or was it really those things weren't as much of a concern as I need to get healthy?
Yeah, we didn't really get the benefit of a transition. So, and I'm sure anybody who's gone through a medical retirement can probably understand this, but you're on a course. So I was doing the job that I absolutely loved. For me, it provided me purpose, meaning, and significance, and I very much thought, I was living out my life's purpose, being a Special Forces operator, leading men into battle, facing, and destroying evil. That to me provided a tremendous amount of both purpose and fulfillment. And then it was like one day, hey, you've had too many blows to the head, you can't do this anymore. And then 6 to 9 months later, we're literally out on the streets trying to figure out up from down and left to right. Meanwhile, the VA's rated us with 33 disabilities, service-related disabilities, 100% through the VA. So, labeled as a 100% disabled through the VA, on the street, waiting for retirement and military compensations to come into place. We were like 9 months without receiving those full aid. So, again, we were kind of just left to our own devices. And I had come to this crossroads where I was sick. We weren't getting answers. I went from, like you said in the intro, a high performer in situations of life and death, to waking up one day in the military, finding myself on 13 medications and an alcoholic. My wife was 9 months pregnant with our last child, and she asked me point blank, hey, can you not drink so much today in case I go into labor so I don't have to drive myself to the hospital? And things, continued to get worse from there. But it was coming to that understanding kind of, hey, nobody in the medical community is going to take responsibility for sorting out and fixing my life. So, I came to this conclusion at my son's bedside, hospital bedside, where I just downed a airplane whiskey with some opiates that was prescribed to me, and I realized, like, hey, this is going to go one of two ways. All right, I can continue on the same path that I'm on, the one that Western medical model has dictated for me, and it's going to kill me, and it's going to ruin my family and everything I love. Or I can decide to act, decide to quit blaming the external circumstances of life on my personal condition, and rather, for the first time in my life, I'd become a victim, and rather than saying, whatever if everything is going wrong or what I don't like, we're going to focus on doing what we do like. And if we want something to change, then we're not going to cry about it. We're going to go out there and find a way to change it. So, Dwayne, that had me looking for, first, that changed my mindset, and it switched me out of that kind of victim mentality that I was in. Oh, life is so hard, and I can't operate anymore, and I've lost purpose, and I'm disabled, and blah, 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 blah. And when I pulled myself out of that, it was like a reckoning. All right, let's get back to work. Let's find something that gives us purpose and meaning again. And for me, I found the antidote to suffering is service. So finding a way that you can serve someone or something that's bigger than yourself. And that kind of led us on the entrepreneurial routes that we can definitely jump into.
Yeah, wow. Thanks for sharing that, Andrew. It's very helpful to others to hear that, especially when it's coming from somebody who has led such a high performance type of life, and now has overcome such challenges that most would just lay down and allow, like you said, the circumstances to kind of dictate the future. Some of the stuff that you brought up, not being a victim and taking charge and changing your mindset, those are all important things, in particular as an entrepreneur. But in particular, more importantly, in situations that you described, those are key to being able to move forward and to live that empowering and fulfilling life that you deserve. And so that's being able to share that and be so clear is very important to the listeners. So I really thank you and appreciate you being open with that level of detail, because I think that's going to help somebody out there that's going to hear the show. They're going to say, wow, that's me. I can do that. I can stop this. I can change that. Look at what you've done prior to that. I mean, you've done things just as hard, surviving in the job that you are in. So that's amazing. And so as you started to take charge, did it start to become clear that you wanted to form a nonprofit such as you have? And if so, kind of what was that like?
It did start to become clear, so it started with a decision, and that was to live a life worth living. And for me, that was to live a life worth living again. And so you had to then frame it in the context of why, what's why, I'm referring to as our meaning in life, our mission, or what gives us purpose or meaning. And it's different for everybody based off of, what gets you going. But, for me, it was defining that why. And what I was having was an identity crisis based around the circumstance. And what I thought was my identity, first as an athlete and then as a Special Forces operator, when I really looked at it, I was like, those were just specific tools that helped me to derive purpose, which drove to fulfillment. But if you really look at it, it was about belonging to something bigger than myself and serving that cause. And so I was like, that is the underlying condition. I mean, that is the reason that made being an athlete and made being an operator so important. So it wasn't like, okay, now my life's over because now those things don't exist. Looking at it and understanding that that's what I drew out of it, then I can now say, okay, well, where can I now find new purpose and new significance to drive to fulfillment? And so I'd identified, yes, we're going to live a life worth living again. We've identified our why. Then for me, it was get better, be returned to the man of my pre-injury status, get off all the medication that I was told I was going to need to be on for the rest of my life, and start living and start serving again. And then from there, I was like, okay, I found a way to get better after going through all every modality, both in the Department of Defense and out of the Department of Defense for, treating or healing my traumatic brain injuries. Once I did that, the light started to go off. Okay, this isn't being the healing that I received isn't being offered by DoD or TRICARE or the VA. How can we help others to get the same level of healing that I received? And so that's when we started the foundation. And from there, when you made that decision to live a life worth living again, you really articulated, your reason behind it, your why. The how will start to illuminate itself, and those continue to happen. And so finding the how was through starting the foundation, and then we want to figure out, okay, how can we find a way to completely solve this problem without having to remove somebody from their geographical location or disrupt their normal patterns of life. And so understanding what the problem was really, really good, and then looking in after really understanding what the problem was as far as with healthcare, how do we solve it? And then how do we make it, easily receivable and understandable to the end user? So that's when we started to craft, our unique solution, which, allows us to treat anybody wherever they're at, because we run a decentralized program that doesn't require them to go to a doctor's office or anything else or stand in a line. So that's what we were really excited about as things started to develop. But it was starting through, for us, that framework that I outlined allowed us to get on these paths and get more clear and concise about what we wanted to do, and then, monitor the feedback on our actions to measure if we're getting closer or further away.
Yeah, that's some great points. Going back to some of the stuff that you said a little bit ago, I think that that's very important for people to understand is, we always have to be in line with who our authentic self is, right? We become, like you said, an athlete, we become an operator, things like that. And, while those are things we're doing in our life and things in our career that are building, towards, making an impact on things larger than ourselves, staying in touch with our authentic self and not letting those positions and those roles and responsibilities consume who we are as a person. Because, as your bio states, right, you had a wife and you had 5 children at that time, and that's more of who the authentic, Andrew is within that versus within the roles that you've played. So I think that that's a great differentiation when somebody is struggling with, like you said, identifying who am I now? Because it really comes down to we tend to focus on who we are from a title perspective, how the external world sees us, rather than who are we authentically inside. And so I think those are some really good points for everybody to hear and understand that while you may be blessed with the ability to play football at a college and do really well, or even, like you said, potentially go on to the higher level, that isn't the end state of who you are, as well as our ability to serve our country. While it's a huge honor in being able to do something as courageous as the positions that you were in as a Green Beret is admirable. It's amazing. It's a must for our country to have those amazing people. But there's more for those people beyond those times in their life. And so being able to identify that authentic self and still serve a higher purpose is exactly what, we need to be doing as individuals. So great points. All right, we're going to go ahead and take a quick commercial break. And when we get back, we're going to get more into the how aspect that Andrew was alluding to a couple of minutes ago when he was describing the framework of how they came about with the nonprofit after they identified the why. Then they needed to figure out, okay, how do we do this? What do we need to do kind of things. So we're going to go ahead now and take a quick commercial break, and we'll be right back.
Landmark Life Coaching's vision is to be the nation's premier coaching partner for inspiring and empowering those in transition. They partner with courageous groundbreakers and transitioning veterans to create fulfilling and empowering futures that they desire. They have partnered with various entrepreneurs and transitioning veterans to leverage their core strengths and implement the framework for the future they always dreamed of. Could you or anyone you know benefit from a success partner to bring clarity to your future or their future? If so, Please check out landmarklifecoaching.com for more information and charliemikepodcast.com for the Charlie Mike Podcast, showcasing the successes of combat veteranpreneurs. Hey, we are here and we're back now with Andrew Marr, who is the CEO of Warrior Angels Foundation. Before we went to break, Andrew had given us a great overview of his military career, some information on how he had transitioned out of the military under medical reasons, and then, how his life had become refocused on being able to serve another higher purpose, which became his foundation. And he was alluding to, that, once they established the why this foundation exists, now they were focused on how are we going to execute and make sure we can serve as many veterans in need as possible. So, Andrew, can you take us more into the exact things that you guys do in the foundation for our veterans?
Yeah, certainly. So the Warrior Angels Foundation, through my own experiences with what we now know were a number of traumatic brain injuries, when I was raising my hand to get help, it was hard to figure out why the train was coming off the track, so to speak. And so never had any issues, behavioral health issues, problems with, cognition or memory or any really chronic physical ailments. And those all were just mounting up, in rapid succession, which in a very short amount of time left me looking completely different from anything that I would identify with as myself or my former self. And so going from that high-performing status to, like I said, being on 13 medications, I was diagnosed as clinically depressed and mood disorders and anxiety and probably learning disabilities and all these other things. And I was basically told, hey, this is the new you. Keep a pen and pad wherever you go because you won't be able to remember anything, and try to learn how to live within these new parameters. And that just didn't make sense to me. I had started to do my own homework, and I came to the conclusions like, hey, blast trauma affects the neuroendocrine system. The neuroendocrine system produces hormones that goes and is responsible for everything else that we do in the body, physically, emotionally. And if that's damaged, then you can expect to have a lot of these problems that I was having. And when I was going to the medical professionals that I was essentially told to see, they were like, oh, this is untrue, or I'm unaware of any research on that, or what you're talking about is not what we're going to look at. So continue to take these multiple medications and go to psychotherapy and good luck with your life. And I started to understand, you know what? First of all, none of the physicians and specialists I was seeing were talking to one another, and nobody had identified an underlying condition. And it became real clear to me, like, hey, if we don't identify like where exactly the break in the dam is, then all we're doing is symptom management. And at the end of the day, that doesn't do anything to fix the problem. And so we were about fixing problems. So first it was like, how do we identify the underlying condition? When I linked up with Dr. Marr Gordon, one of the leading neuroendocrinologists in the world out of Los Angeles, California, he basically said, hey, I have a formula not only to identify the underlying condition, but to treat it. And here's the statistics on it. Here's my, here's my credentials, and here's our stats with trying this method in our practice. And at that time, Dr. Gordon had treated over 1,400 or 1,500 civilian TBI cases with incredible results. And then he showed me all the science, the literature that backed up what he was doing. He's like, I didn't come up with anything new. I just read all the science and applied it. And that's how he had the protocols. So through a lab analysis, they can identify specific blood markers that are going to show us two things, Dwayne. One, is there inflammation, what they call neuroinflammation in the brain, which is fancy word for swelling? And then two, does that neuroinflammation then cause a downregulation in hormones that are produced in the brain? So basically saying, is it making your hormones not run as efficiently and as optimal as possible. Well, when we did an objective lab analysis, we found that I was deficient in every key hormone that is created in her body as a direct result of being in and around explosions. So the inflammation leads to essentially squeezing that off, and it does it like, think of like a hose, and the water's running through the hose. Well, now that electrical signal has either been crossed, it's not as strong, or it's too strong, and so on the other thing, and that manifests when the different portions of the brain are talking to one another, it manifests as depression, it manifests as anxiety, rage, problems with cognition and everything else. So he says, so that's how we identified the underlying condition. And what I loved about it was objective, because there was nothing objective when I was put on 13 medications. Mm-hmm. It was somebody's subjective opinion to say, oh, you feel bad, let's put you on this. And the repercussions and the side effects from a lot of these drugs have unbelievable consequences. And I was definitely on the receiving end of that. And so looking at how to identify it is definitely one step, but if you can't solve it or fix it or treat it, then you haven't really, again, solved the problem. And so identify it, one, through an objective lab analysis, which we use the best labs and technology in the world to do that. And then two, you treat it. So those two things that I said, inflammation and then being deficient in key hormones, we treat those based on your individual physiological needs based off of the lab tests. So from that, we can deduce, okay, this person, because of the lab markers, we know they have inflammation. We can use natural means to decrease your overall inflammation and inflammation in the brain. From there, based off of your readings, if you're deficient in key hormones, we will help to replenish or replace what the body is no longer making. And so when you put the body back in that environment where it can get rid of inflammation, it can run optimally, a crazy thing happens. People start to get better. And now we have over 200 examples of that with the Warrior Angels Foundation, with the veterans we've helped, and more than 1,600 documented cases through Dr. Gordon's Millennium Health Centers. So that in an overview is how we're able to administer or help people to heal. Identify the underlying condition, treat it effectively, allow the body to come back on and treat it and heal itself through as natural means as possible. So 80% of the things that we prescribe are things that are found in nature. Very few times do we need an actual prescribed medication from a doctor, but that definitely is needed for some instances. But what sets us apart, other than that, which is we've identified, treated, and can treat the underlying condition, is the delivery method. So when a veteran or a service member is cleared for funding through the foundation, they've met all our prerequisites, we send them a lab kit at their actual physical location. All right, so let's just say I'm in Southern California right now, and the person in question is in Portland, Oregon. So our lab is in Florida. The lab will send a lab kit to the veteran's house in Portland, Oregon. We will make coordinations for that veteran then to go to a lab drawing facility that's closest to their geographical location, because through our lab we have a contract with sister labs in every state and virtually every major city. So people can go from their house directly to the lab. The lab draws their blood. The lab then sends that back to Florida to be analyzed. It's overnighted via FedEx. And then those results are sent to Dr. Gordon in California. Dr. Gordon will compile your results, then email them to you. His office will set up a video conference with you to go over said results. So he'll be in LA, the veteran client/patient on this hypothetical situation would be in Portland. All right, so they video chat. Dr. Gordon would go over all of the results, why you're probably having the issues that you're having, and how he recommends to treat it. After that, both of you guys will agree on your personalized protocol, and then we'll make sure that that protocol is mailed out to you, to your residence that day or the next business day. From there on, we do a follow-up questionnaire every month to check in to see how you're doing, and we do follow-up labs every 90 to 120 days to, again, objectively look at how you're improving, and we can make changes on that. And we got about 12 articles that we'll produce in the scientific literature coming out in probably 2018. But some of the preliminary reports on a study of a sample size of 58 individuals we did showed a 50% improvement under 90 days. And the 1-year cohort we did showed a 73% improvement while being able to come off medication in 413 days is what we looked at with that specific example. So it's being able to say, hey, we've identified the problem. We have a new and status quo breaking solution, and then we can back it up with the scientific literature, what it says, what the evidence is, and then we can show what our personal results are enacting this treatment plan or this business model, if you're thinking it from that standpoint. And so it's no different than nonprofit from a regular business world, because you have to separate yourself and all those key markers that I just talked about. And so those things just didn't start on day one, Dwayne. They unfolded, as we got in there and continued to push out, a minimal viable product, MVP, and continued to change based off the feedback we're getting. And that's kind of how we came to where we're at with the foundation today.
Wow, very impressive. You guys have quite a framework in place to be able to reach across the entire United States for meeting any veteran's needs. That's pretty impressive, because some of the issues that even from a VA perspective that veterans run into is depends on where you live, what kind of facilities are close by, how soon can you get in for treatment, and then things take time, and so whether it's getting an appointment, getting results, getting whatever. I just know, even from a personal perspective, my father's a Vietnam veteran, retired. He's on, he has a certain amount of VA disability. It's a nightmare in his local area to get the support that he needs, because there's so many veterans in that area that they're just overwhelmed. So a service like this, is much needed, and you guys really seem to be hitting on some key things with the natural means to be able to get the body to heal and regenerate. Because when you look at medications, for example, it's hard to believe that when you already have a complicated medical situation to begin with multiple factors, like you had said, 33 different areas potentially with issues, to think of how, in your case, 13 meds would ever play together nicely. Right. And you to be able to know what's causing what additional side effect from that is just mind-boggling to me. But when I think about how you guys are approaching it, understanding, like you said, the root problem, the root cause, and the two key areas that you guys identified with the inflammation and key hormones, that now from a studies and experience, they know, okay, well, these natural things will work for inflammation. These things will work for regulating hormones. And so it takes a lot of the guesswork out of it, per se. And so I think you guys are really, really onto something, and your model of how you've built the nonprofit to be sustainable and expand over time, but backed up by the articles that you referenced that are coming out that give the no kidding, okay, if you're questioning, is this real? Does this really work? Where does this come from? That having that substantiation, you need that in any business, like you said. So people, no matter what product you're pushing out, okay, show me how you got to this point with this product, because I don't exactly see it as a consumer. So I can see where people would easily be able to see these guys have done the legwork. These guys have proven that this is working. They have the data to support it, and you can explain your numbers, because anybody that's running a business needs to be able to explain the numbers, not only from a financial perspective of how a business is doing, but key numbers like you were explaining with people the rates of people recovering and things like that, so that there's substantiation behind it.
Yeah, and in business terms, they call it the value proposition, but you have to have it. You have to be able to say, hey, here's how we create value that currently no one else can create that. Now, whether that's a for-profit, nonprofit, it doesn't matter. If you don't have that differentiator, you're never going to rise up above the noise, and nor should you. So you have to earn it, just like everything else, and this is a way to earn it. You know what I mean? That's the framework. Many entrepreneurs have tried to do it differently, but I don't know. There's always 101 ways to skin a cat, but at the end of the day, there's some things that through time has shown that you have to have, and going through that process allowed us to come out on the other end. But it's evidence based. That's the point all the way through. It has to be, hey, what results are we producing, and then you have to understand why are those results being produced, and really start to have a better understanding of how your inner workings are fitting together.
Yeah, so what are some of you guys' next major milestones as you continue with what you're doing?
Well, me and my brother just had finished up a book last year. It will come out, I think the ebook comes out in August, and then they're doing the physical book launch in January. It's called Tales from the Blast Factory. You can already pre-order it on Amazon, or you can go to talesfromtheblastfactory.com to read up more on that. But that's one. As we continue to evolve the foundation, it became clear, like, hey, we might not be able to raise enough funds to treat everybody. That's what we're working towards. We want to get this protocol implemented in the DOD and the VA, and that will effectively have worked us out of a job. But that's right where we want to be. We just wanted to solve a problem. But then I realized, what, if we can't physically raise the money for 400,000 individuals who need help right now, what's the next best thing? And it was, okay, giving a platform where this information is produced, stored, and then shared. And when I was first looking for this information, that didn't exist. And now through the foundation, and now our sister for-profit venture, Warrior Soul, we're able to put together this incredible information and make it readily available on an easily accessible platform for everybody. And that's kind of how we're evolving it. And then it's just like, okay, well, what else is good information that I would have liked to have known when I was sick, or when I was still, operating or in the military? And we have, a whole list of those things. And so now we've consolidated that. And what we wanted to do was give somebody the ability to earn their own truth by experiencing it and deciding whether or not this is valid or something they can apply in their lives to hopefully, like I said, earn their own truth, strengthen their mind, and toughen their body. And so Warrior Soul kind of provides more of a software solution, whereas Warrior Angels is a hardware solution, if you can think about it like that. So software meaning programs that you can download into your mind and your memory bank and use to run more optimally in life. And so, we have nutrition experts on there, and we have all kinds of nutritional programs, fitness programs. We're big in the entrepreneurial and the innovation side of things. So every type of thing in life, we think that we could make a module or a course or a book or some type of content that could help somebody else in a similar position. We're putting that out now through Warrior Soul, and have a number of ways that we're monetizing that as well.
Wow, great. That's amazing. You guys have so much going on, and it's all so helpful to so many people out there. So I'll be excited to get this episode out so that as many people out there can hear this information. So as we're coming to a close here, I'd like to give you an opportunity to let the listeners know, if they want to learn more information, how to get in contact with you. Yeah,
the best way is our website, which is www.warriorsoulagoge.com. Agoge is AGOGE, warriorsoulagoge.com. Everything that you could ever want or look for is on that website. And you can find ways to our social media and contact me directly if you'd like to do so through that modality.
Great. Well, thank you again for being on the show, and most importantly, thank you for your service to our country.
You're welcome, Dwayne. Thanks for putting this out and, for illuminating information that will be able to be a benefit to other people in their lives. I can't say enough about that. Thank you.
Remember, loyal listeners, we are the home of the free because of the brave.
Thank you for tuning in to Charlie Mike Podcast with Dwayne Perro. Our objective is to bring successful veteranpreneurs to help inspire and provide insight into what helped them become successful, with the hopes you can take away various strategies you can implement in your entrepreneurial journey. Visit us on iTunes, leave us a rating and review, and let us know what you thought of the show. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Hoorah!